Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into one of the Bible's most powerful, and let's be honest, most misunderstood visions. We're talking about the heavenly throne room scene from the book of Revelation. Now, this vision is packed with some pretty wild stuff. Strange creatures, a mysterious scroll, and a dramatic twist that completely flips our understanding of what real power looks like. Okay, so to really get what's going on here, you have to understand the context. This wasn't just some abstract spiritual vision. No, this was a direct, and I mean daring, political statement. It was aimed squarely at the most powerful man on the planet at the time, the Roman emperor. So the visionary, a guy named John, paints this picture of God's throne room that, well, for his first century audience, it would have been shockingly familiar. See, the Roman emperor at the time, Domitian, he was known to be surrounded by 24 bodyguards, called lictors, and he had priests with golden crowns praising him. Sound familiar? This vision basically takes that whole imperial court setup and drops it into heaven, asking a pretty provocative question: who's the real boss of the universe? And this quote from Dr. Dave Mathewson just hits the nail on the head. He says, Caesar's throne is seen to be a parody, a poor parody, and a deficient one of God's throne. So you see, this isn't just about a worship service. It's powerful anti-imperial rhetoric. It's basically saying that the power of Rome, the biggest empire on earth, is just a cheap knockoff, a pale, flawed imitation of the real authority that runs the universe. So surrounding this incredible throne is a whole cast of symbolic characters, and each one has a really specific job and meaning. Let's break down who's who in this heavenly court. All right, first up, we've got these 24 elders. Now, it's important to know these aren't humans who died and went to heaven. The text actually presents them as angelic beings, and their job is to represent all of God's people. And what are they doing? They're constantly laying their golden crowns before the throne, which is this powerful symbol of them saying, "You're the one in charge, not us." Okay, then there's this sea of glass right in front of the throne. And this image, it is just packed with symbolism. You got to remember, in the ancient world, the sea was the ultimate symbol of chaos and evil. It was the abyss, the place where monsters came from, pure, untamed destruction. But look what happens here. That chaotic, terrifying sea is totally held in check. Before God's throne, it's perfectly calm, like glass. It's this incredibly bold statement, right? It's saying that in the presence of true, ultimate authority, all those forces of evil and chaos, they've already been defeated. They're powerless. And then we get to these really strange hybrid creatures. John is drawing on visions from prophets like Ezekiel and Isaiah here. And these creatures represent the entire spectrum of life on Earth. You've got the wildest animal, the lion, the strongest domestic one, the ox, humanity itself, and the king of the birds, the eagle. And what do? Their one and only job is to lead a universal, nonstop chorus of praise. So the scene is set. God is on the throne, the undisputed creator, everyone's worshiping, everything seems perfect. But right when the worship hits its peak, bam, a huge problem is introduced. And it's a problem so big, it brings all of heaven to a complete standstill and throws the whole vision into a crisis. What's the problem? Well, in God's right hand, which is always the hand of power and authority, there's a scroll. And this is not just some random document. This scroll contains the answer to everything. It's God's master plan to bring justice, to end suffering, to finally make earth like it is in heaven. The entire destiny of the world is locked up inside this. Then a mighty angel poses the central question of the entire vision. It's this massive cosmic challenge. Who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll? Basically, who in all of existence has the authority, the right, the sheer worthiness to take this plan from God's hand and actually make it happen? And so this desperate, universe-wide search begins. I mean, they look everywhere. They scan the heavens, checking out even the most powerful angels. They scour the entire earth, looking at every human. They even look under the earth, in the realm of the dead. Literally, no corner of creation is left unchecked. And the result? A crushing, absolute failure. No one, not a single being in all of creation is found worthy. The whole plan to save the world is dead in the water before it can even start. And John, the one seeing all this, he completely understands the terrifying implications. He just breaks down, weeping his heart out, because he gets it. If that scroll stays sealed, there's no hope. It means injustice and oppression win. It means salvation is impossible. It means all the suffering of good people was for nothing. All hope is just gone. But right then, just as all hope seems completely lost, one of those 24 elders cuts through John's weeping with some good news. But what he says, well, it sets up one of the most stunning and, frankly, important paradoxes you'll find anywhere in literature. Okay, so here's the core twist of the whole vision. The elder tells John, "Stop weeping. Look, the lion has triumphed." So naturally, John's expecting to see this powerful, conquering lion, right? A symbol of military power, of a triumphant king. But when he turns to look, he sees the exact opposite. He sees a small, vulnerable lamb, and it looks like it's just been slaughtered. And this just turns everything we think about power and victory completely upside down. The lion wins by becoming a lamb. His victory wasn't won by dishing out violence the way the Roman Empire conquered. Nope. It was won by absorbing violence through his own sacrificial death. So this shocking revelation, this completely new idea of what power looks like, power in sacrifice, victory in death, it immediately and dramatically solves that cosmic crisis. Think about how this unfolds. The lamb doesn't just walk into the room. He emerges from the very center of the throne. This is huge. It means he shares God's own being and authority. And he's found worthy not in spite of his death, but because of it. And so he does the one thing nobody else in all of creation could do. He walks right up to God and takes the scroll. He has the authority to set the plan in motion. And the second the lamb takes that scroll, the entire universe just explodes in a new song of praise. It's like a shockwave. It starts with the elders and the four living creatures, then it's picked up by millions and millions of angels, and finally, get this, every single creature in heaven, on earth, and under the earth joins in, and they're all worshiping both God on the throne and the Lamb. So, what's the bottom line of this whole epic vision? It all builds to this one key takeaway, a radical redefinition of what strength even is. It's a direct challenge to the Roman way, power through force, through domination. Instead, it gives us this counter-narrative where true, world-changing power is found in the self-sacrificing love of a slain lamb. And that leaves us with a pretty provocative thought, doesn't it? I mean, we live in a world that, a lot like ancient Rome, often thinks power is about force and control and winning no matter the cost. But what if this vision is right? What if the ultimate measure of strength and influence looks completely different? What if true power looks less like a conquering lion and a whole lot more like a sacrificial lamb?